Penguin Random House Audio presents The Lords of Time by Eva Garcia Sáenz. Translated from the Spanish by Nick Caster. Read for you by Henry Levya. 1. Villa Suso Palace, Unai, September 2019. I could begin this story with the shocking discovery of a body in Villa Suso Palace. One of the richest men in the country, the owner of a ready-to-wear fashion empire, poisoned with La Mosca Española, or Spanish fly, the legendary medieval equivalent of Viagra. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'll write about what happened the evening we went to the book launch for The Lords of Time, the novel everyone in Vitoria was talking about. We were all fascinated by this work of historical fiction, especially me. It was one of those books that completely transported you. From the opening paragraph, it was as though an invisible hand grabbed you by the scruff of the neck and drew you into this ferocious medieval world. It was magnetic. You couldn't resist, even if you wanted to. It wasn't so much a book as a trap made of paper, an ambush of words, and there was no escape. My brother Germán, my alter ego Estibaliz, my entire cuadrilla. No one was talking about anything else. Many people had polished off the 470 pages in only 3 nights. Some of us, however, preferred to enjoy it in small doses, as if it were a poison or a bewitching drug, prolonging the experience of being transported to the year of our Lord, 1192. I was so immersed that sometimes when Alba and I were enjoying our early morning rendezvous between the sheets, I called her my lady. But there was an added attraction to the experience, a mystery. Who was the elusive author? A week and a half after the novel was released, it was flying off bookstore shelves, but there was not a single photograph of the author anywhere, not on the novel's cover, not in any of the newspapers. He hadn't given any interviews, and there was no sign of him on social media. He didn't even have a website. He was either a pariah or an anachronism. Some people thought that Diego Velaz, the author's name, was a pseudonym, a nod to the novel's protagonist, Count Diego Vela. It was impossible to know anything back then. The truth had not yet spread its capricious wings over the cobbled streets of Vitoria's medieval quarter. The evening was sepia-colored as I crossed the Plaza de Machete carrying Deba on my shoulders. I was sure my 2-year-old daughter, who already considered herself grown up, would not be a nuisance at the book launch, but grandfather had come along to help out just in case, even though it was the night before La Fiesta de San Andrés, and he would be celebrating the patronal holiday in Villaverde. Alba and I were delighted when he'd appeared at our apartment. We were desperate for a chance to relax. The previous 2 weeks we'd been working overtime on a case involving 2 young sisters, aged 17 and 12, who had disappeared in very strange circumstances, and we needed sleep. We were hoping for a few hours' respite after 14 fruitless days of investigation, time to collapse under the duvet and recharge our batteries. Saturday was already shaping up to be just as frustrating as the past couple of weeks had been. All the routine work was done. We'd organized searches with volunteers and dogs, and we'd gotten the judge's authorization to seize families' and friends' cell phones. Our team had examined all the CCTV footage in the province, and the forensics team had painstakingly gone through the families' vehicles with a fine-tooth comb. We had interviewed anyone who had come into contact with the girls over the course of their brief lives, and we had found nothing. They had vanished into thin air. There were 2 of them, which meant the drama was twice as intense, as was the pressure Superintendent Medina was putting on Alba, his deputy. People had lined up for a mile under the warm streetlights in the Plaza de Machete, waiting for the book launch to begin. The event coincided with the traditional September medieval market. The paved square was filled with the smell of corn on the cob and chinchorta cake. Furious violins played the theme from Game of Thrones. A performer dressed in green velvet juggled 3 red balls while a bull-necked man stuffed the head of an albino boa into his mouth. The square that had once been the city market was busier than ever. The line of readers disappeared under the arquillos del juicio, where vendors were selling pottery and lavender essential oil beneath the arcades. I suddenly caught sight of Estibaliz, my partner in the criminal investigation unit. She was with Alba's mother, who had adopted her as one of her own after their first meeting and had included her in all our family traditions ever since. My mother-in-law, Nieves Díaz de Salvatierra, was a retired actress who had been a child prodigy in 1950s Spanish cinema. She had now found the peace and quiet she so longed for as the manager of a hotel in La Guardia. The fortress-like space was set between vineyards and the mountains of Tolonio. The range was named after Tulonio, the Celtic god I prayed to when the universe turned dark. "Unai!" shouted Estibaliz, waving an arm. "Over here!" Alba, grandfather, and I headed in their direction. Deba gave her Aunt Esti a sloppy kiss on the cheek, and we were finally able to enter the Villa Suso, a stone Renaissance building that had stood proudly for 5 centuries on the hilltop where the city was first built. "I think the family's all here," I said, extending my phone to a sky that was already turning a deep indigo. "Look here, everyone." 4 generations of the Díaz de Salvatierra and López de Ayala families smiled for our selfie. "I think the launch is in the Martín de Salinas room on the 2nd floor, said Alba, cheerfully leading the way. "Such an innocent mystery, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "The author. This evening we're finally going to discover his identity," she replied, intertwining her fingers with mine. If only the mysteries at work were so innocuous. "Speaking of mysteries," Estibaliz broke in, pushing Alba as we entered the room. "Don't walk on the woman trapped in the walls, Alba. The security guards say she appears at night in the hallways near the restrooms, and her moans are terrifying." Alba jumped to one side. Swept along by the crowd, she had accidentally stepped on the glass panel that covered the skeleton of a medieval woman, according to a plaque on the wall. "Don't mention ghosts or skeletons in front of Deba," she said with a wink, lowering her voice. "I don't want her to have any trouble going to bed tonight. I need her to sleep like a hibernating bear. Her mother desperately needs rest." Grandfather smiled, the half-smile of a centenarian who had many more years of assessing people than we did. "You're not going to scare the chiquita with a few piles of bones." I could have sworn there was a touch of pride in his gruff voice. He seemed to really understand Deba. They shared a simple, effective telepathy that excluded the rest of us. Deba and her great-grandfather communicated through looks and shrugs, and to our bewilderment, he understood better than anyone what made her cry, the reasons she refused to wear her rubber boots even when it was pouring, and what the scribbles meant that she drew on every surface she came across. We finally managed to get into the room, although we had to settle for seats in the next-to-last row. Grandfather sat Deba on his lap and let her wear his beret, which accentuated how similar they looked, turning her into his tiny clone. As he entertained my daughter, I tried to forget my worries from work for a moment. I looked around the narrow, stone-walled chamber with its thick wooden beams across the ceiling. Behind the long table with the 3 empty chairs and 3 unopened bottles of water, a faded tapestry of the Trojan horse dominated the back wall. I glanced at my cell phone. The book launch was almost 45 minutes behind schedule. The gentleman to my right, who had a copy of the novel on his lap, was fidgeting, and he wasn't the only one. None of the speakers had appeared yet. Alba shot me a look that said, if they take much longer, we're going to have to take them.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?